The red dust was already inside the studio before anybody in charge admitted it. It was not a normal dust storm. I saw it first on the edge of my coffee lid, a thin reddish grit caught in the damp ring beside the cup, and then on the black plastic around the weather desk where the air conditioning vent blew across the room. That vent had a clean filter 2 days earlier. I knew because the building engineer had swapped it after the meteor shower coverage, when everybody was joking about skyrocks and free wishes and backyard camera footage. By 5:43 in the morning, the filter access panel had a red smear around the seam, and the hallway smelled dry and metallic, not smoky, not dusty, not the way Phoenix smells when wind shoves the desert through town. I was looking at radar, surface observations, freeway cameras, satellite fire products, and air quality monitors at the same time, and none of it lined up. That was the first honest thing I need people to understand. A real dust storm in Arizona has fingerprints. It moves with outflow boundaries from thunderstorms. It has a source region. It has a direction. It has a leading edge. It hits certain road corridors harder because the desert opens up in certain places and because loose sediment gets lifted from dry washes, construction sites, farm edges, burn scars, and open flats. You can track a haboob across the valley even when it looks ugly. You can warn people on Interstate 10, Interstate 8, State Route 87, Loop 202, and the roads east and south of Phoenix because the wind tells you where the dust has to go. This red dust did not care what the wind said. The official line came out at 6:15 in the morning through the county emergency feed, and it sounded reasonable if you had not spent your life watching bad air move across the southwest. They called it a regional dust and ash event following last night's meteor activity, possible wildfire residue, disturbed desert sediment, reduced visibility, shelter indoors if sensitive. I read it once and I stopped. I did not repeat the ash part. There were no active fires with enough smoke production in the right direction. The satellite heat signatures did not support it. The wind near the surface was weak out of the northeast in Phoenix, barely enough to push loose trash across a parking lot. While reports were already coming from Casa Grande, Buckeye, Gila Bend, Wickenburg, Tucson, Kingman, Barstow, Las Vegas, and areas north of Las Cruces. That is not one dust plume, that is a map full of separate problems. The meteor shower had peaked between 1:30 and 3:10 in the morning. People all over Arizona were awake for it because the sky was clear and the forecast had been dry enough to make backyard viewing easy. We had a crescent moon, low humidity, and very little cloud cover. The first videos showed green and white streaks breaking over the upper atmosphere. That happens. The unusual part came later when several larger fragments flashed orange over western New Mexico and southern Arizona, and people reported low rumbles several minutes after the light. I did not work the overnight shift, but I was called in before dawn because viewers had started sending pictures of red residue on windshields, pool covers, roof-mounted solar panels, and backyard furniture. The residue looked too fine to be ordinary grit. It collected in corners, under door gaps, around window tracks, and inside parked cars with old seals. I told people to stop touching it with bare hands before anybody told me to. That got me a message from one producer asking if I was escalating beyond guidance. I said no, I was giving basic air quality advice. Unknown particulate matter gets treated as unknown particulate matter. You do not sweep it dry. You do not blow it away with a leaf blower. You do not rinse it into storm drains if you can avoid it. You do not let kids draw lines in it on the hood of your car. You keep pets indoors. You shut exterior doors. You close fireplace dampers if you still have one. You run heating and cooling systems on recirculate where possible. You use a high-efficiency filter if your system can handle it without choking the airflow. You put a damp towel at the bottom of a door if dust is pushing under it. That is not panic. That is just not being dumb. By 6:32, the first freeway camera on Interstate 10 near Picacho Peak showed a low red haze sitting on the pavement in bands, not blowing across the lanes. Sitting. That got my attention more than the color. Dust that fine should have stayed suspended if there was enough turbulence, or it should have settled more evenly if the air was calm. This was forming streaks along guardrails, signs, and the cable barriers in the median. Tractor trailers were dragging it into thin wake patterns behind the tires, and then the patterns collapsed back toward the metal rails. I watched 3 different camera angles and had the same bad thought every time. The dust was showing preference. It collected near metal, power infrastructure, and drainage channels, not just wherever wind allowed it. At 6:40, schools in the East Valley started moving to indoor shelter procedures, first quietly, then all at once. Mesa, Chandler, Gilbert, Tempe, Scottsdale, and Queen Creek had parents calling because bus drivers reported visibility drops under a quarter mile in isolated pockets. A quarter mile is a serious driving hazard, but the strange part was the patchiness. One campus had clear air at the front entrance and red haze behind the gym where rooftop equipment sat above the locker rooms. Another had dust coming through a building return vent while the playground stayed mostly clear. A charter school near South Mountain had red powder coating the chain link fence and the evaporative cooler pads on an older classroom building. That detail mattered. Evaporative coolers pull outdoor air through wet pads. Anything in that air gets dragged right inside. I kept my voice steady because that is the job. People do not need a guy on a microphone sounding scared while he tells them their child's school is sheltering. I said keep students indoors, keep doors closed, do not run outdoor physical education, and do not assume clear sunlight means clean air. I told school staff to check nurse offices for kids with asthma, recent respiratory infections, open scrapes from sports, eye irritation, or immune problems. I told parents not to rush to campuses unless the district told them to come, because road congestion makes sheltering worse. That part made people mad online, which I understood, but it was still true. 1,000 parents driving through contaminated pockets adds exposure, blocks emergency vehicles, and drags dust home. The air monitors started failing before 7. At first, I thought the numbers were spiking because the particles were very small, maybe in the range that triggers readings for fine particulate pollution. Then one county technician called off record and said several units were throwing impossible sensor errors. He said filters turned orange-red within minutes at 2 stations and one pump seized after grinding for less than half an hour. The monitors near industrial corridors were not always the worst. A station near a canal showed higher contamination than one beside a freeway. A station on a school roof showed red material building around electrical conduit and metal mounting brackets. He sounded embarrassed because he could not give me a clean measurement. I told him the lack of a clean measurement was itself useful. The county health department pushed a public statement a few minutes later telling residents to treat the event as a severe dust episode, use protective masks rated for fine particles, stay indoors, avoid strenuous outdoor activity, and seek medical help for serious breathing trouble. That was solid advice. The problem was the phrase severe dust episode. It made everyone reach for the wrong box in their head. People in Phoenix know dust. People know the brown wall on the horizon, the sudden wind, the sand hitting windows, the chain reaction crashes near Casa Grande, the flight delays, the orange sunset after a bad fire season. That memory can save lives. But it can also make you underestimate a new thing because the first words used for it sound familiar. This was not behaving under the rules we teach kids during monsoon season. At 7:12, I got the first direct report from my brother. He is Highway Patrol, Southern Arizona, based out of the Tucson area. I am not going to dress that up. He texted me one line. Do not say dust storm if you are not sure. Then he called from the shoulder near the stretch between Marana and Picacho, where officers were responding to a pileup. His voice had that hard, clipped sound people get when he is trying to keep his brain organized under stress, he said. Visibility dropped from clear to nearly zero in less than 30 seconds, but there was no wind blast before it. A red cloud came down onto the interstate and settled in the lanes. Drivers hit brakes, drifted, overcorrected, and then the whole road went bad. He said the first crashes were not high-speed explosions the way people imagine. It was worse in a practical sense because the traffic kept moving into the mess. A box truck stopped sideways. A tanker jackknifed without spilling. Several pickups rear-ended each other. A family sedan slid under the back of a trailer and pinned the front doors. Nobody could see more than a few car lengths. People got out coughing and rubbing their eyes, and that exposed them longer. The red dust stuck to wet skin around eyelids and mouths. It collected on blood from small cuts. It built up on reflective striping, badges, belt buckles, and radio antennas. My brother said it was clinging to patrol units harder than to the asphalt. I asked him about wind because I had to. He swore at me, not angry, just busy, and said flags on the frontage road were hanging almost still. He said the dust moved in sheets near the ground and crawled up metal signposts and the sides of stopped vehicles. He knew that sounded wrong. He said it before I could. He had a mask on, not a great one, just what he had in the unit. And he told me one paramedic was refusing to let responders remove face protection after dust hit open cuts. That paramedic had seen red grains darken around a scraped knuckle on a tow operator's hand. He did not know whether it was a chemical reaction, contamination by blood, or simple moisture absorption, but he knew he did not want it in wounds. I went on air and gave the blunt version. If you are caught in red dust on a road, do not stop in a travel lane unless your vehicle is disabled. Pull completely off the pavement if you can do it safely. Turn off your lights once you are off the road so another driver does not follow your taillights and hit you. Set the parking brake, keep windows up, put ventilation on recirculate. Cover your nose and mouth with a proper respirator or a damp cloth only if that is all you have. Do not walk along the roadway unless your vehicle is burning or unsafe. Do not let children stand outside for a better signal. Do not open the door to film it. That last line sounded silly until we started getting videos from people doing exactly that. The first hospital advisory out of Tucson came at 7:38. Emergency departments were seeing eye irritation, coughing, throat burning, asthma attacks, and skin irritation where people had cuts, burns, surgical incisions, or road rash. Banner, Tucson Medical Center, St. Mary's, and smaller urgent care clinics were all getting calls. Phoenix hospitals were not far behind. The instructions were cautious. Remove contaminated clothing, bag it, rinse exposed skin with clean running water, avoid aggressive scrubbing, irrigate eyes, monitor breathing, protect staff with masks and eye protection. They could not test the dust quickly, that mattered. Hospitals are good at known hazards. Unknown powder is slow because you have to protect staff, contain samples, avoid cross-contamination, and decide which lab is allowed to touch it. Around the same time the solar reports came in. Arizona has a lot of rooftop solar and larger solar farms, and dust always lowers output. That is ordinary. After any dirty weather, panels need cleaning. But this drop was too sharp in some places and too selective in others. A contractor near Buckeye told me panels went from normal production to nearly nothing after a red film formed in streaks over the glass. A school in Goodyear had inverters throwing fault codes because dust gathered around conduit and junction boxes. A utility technician near Gila Bend reported static discharge when he approached a metal enclosure with red powder caked around the latch. He was not hurt badly, but the crew backed off because the air smelled heated around the equipment. Conductive dust is a nightmare nobody wants during a hot day. Dry dust already causes problems in electronics by blocking cooling and fouling contacts. Add moisture, reactive minerals, or conductive particles, and you can get leakage currents, short circuits, sensor errors, heat buildup, false readings, and equipment trips. I explained that in plain terms because people needed to know why their garage door opener, security camera, pool pump, electric vehicle charger, or rooftop equipment might act weird. I also told people not to open electrical panels coated in red dust. Do not brush it off. Do not spray it with a hose while power is on. Do not climb onto a roof for a quick cleaning. Shut systems down if you smell heat, see arcing, hear popping, or see dust packed around vents. Call a professional when conditions are safe. By 8 o'clock, Phoenix looked wrong on the traffic cameras. Not dead, not apocalyptic in the movie sense. Just wrong in the specific way a city looks when too many normal systems start hesitating at once. Cars moved slower on Interstate 17 and the Superstition Freeway. School buses returned to depots or sheltered at campuses. Delivery trucks parked under shade structures. People stood outside office towers with phones out until security guards pulled them back through. Doors, red residue collected along the base of light poles and the seams of parking structures. Downtown was not swallowed. Sky Harbor was still operating in pieces with ground delays and runway inspections, but airport crews were watching dust collect around runway lights and metal grates even where the pavement looked clear. I got accused of making it sound intelligent. I want to be clear. I did not believe the dust was thinking. I still do not know what word fits. Preference does not mean intention. Chemical and physical processes can look directed when a material reacts to charge, moisture, surface texture, vibration, temperature, or electromagnetic fields. Iron filings move near magnets without having a plan. Fine particles cling to charged surfaces without wanting anything. Biofilms grow where water and nutrients exist. None of that is magic. The hard part was that this red dust responded to too many things at once. Metal, standing water, electric fields, open wounds, air filters, wet cooler pads, solar glass, roadside wiring. It was not random dirt. The first state briefing came at 8:22. Arizona officials said multiple agencies were coordinating with county health departments, transportation crews, emergency managers, hospitals, and federal partners. They confirmed road closures on sections of Interstate 10, State Route 85, State Route 87, and local roads near suspected debris fields. They asked the public to avoid collecting meteor fragments. That line landed hard because people had already been doing it. Last night, social media was full of people driving out toward desert roads with flashlights and magnets looking for souvenirs. A meteorite can be scientifically valuable and safe to handle when properly recovered. This was not that, not yet. Not when red dust was coming off the debris and moving in ways nobody had explained. The first impact site report I trusted came from near Wilcox. A rancher found a scorched strip on open land before dawn. No big crater, no Hollywood hole, just broken surface crust, blackened brush, and red powder in the low spots. He said fence wire nearby had red material collected along the strands. His water trough had a reddish film on top, and cattle refused to drink. That got the agriculture people involved fast. In dry country, standing water is a magnet for every kind of practical concern. Livestock tanks, canals, reservoirs, pools, cooling towers, irrigation ditches, golf course ponds, retention basins, school fountains, hospital roof drains, and the Central Arizona Project Canal System all became questions within the same hour. You cannot tell a desert state not to care about water. I told anyone with open water to cover it if possible and stop using it until local officials gave instructions. That included livestock tanks, backyard pools, rain barrels, decorative fountains, and temporary job site water containers. I told people not to dump pool chemicals into red contaminated water without guidance because reactive dust and chemical oxidizers can create new problems. I told people using evaporative coolers to shut them off if the intake pads were red or if the air smelled metallic inside. A lot of older homes, workshops, garages, and small businesses in the Southwest still use swamp coolers or hybrid setups. During heat, shutting one down can become dangerous, so I had to say the other part too. Move to an interior room with cleaner air, reduce activity, drink safe bottled water, check elderly neighbors by phone, and use cooling centers only if officials confirm the building is safe. The heat was the cruel part because this did not happen on a cool day. Phoenix was forecast to hit 106 degrees. Tucson was forecast around 102. Las Vegas was already heading into the low hundreds. If you tell people to seal indoors during a summer pattern heat day, you create a second emergency. Air conditioning needs power. Power systems need clean equipment. People without good cooling need somewhere to go. Cars become dangerous. Bus stops become dangerous. Concrete holds heat. Pets overheat. Elderly residents in older apartments suffer first. A normal dust warning is short. You wait out the worst of it. This red dust was not passing through on schedule. It was settling, collecting, reappearing, and showing up in places that had no visible plume minutes earlier. Around 9, we started getting reports from Nevada and California that made the official regional dust explanation weaker by the minute. Red deposits appeared on cars in Henderson and Boulder City. A truck stop near Needles reported clogged fuel filters and strange residue around pump, handles, and card readers. Barstow had a red film on motel air conditioning units facing a service alley with almost no wind exposure. A warehouse outside Victorville reported loading dock sensors failing after delivery trucks arrived from Arizona. New Mexico had red dust near Lordsburg and Deming, then reports from Las Cruces on vehicles that had driven west overnight. That told me civilians were moving the material faster than weather. Tires, wheel wells, clothing, air filters, cargo trailers, shipping pallets, and radiator fins were becoming transport. I said it bluntly. If your vehicle drove through red dust, treat it as contaminated. Park it away from open doors, air intakes, kids, pets, and standing water. Do not pressure wash it in your driveway. Do not use compressed air. Do not vacuum the interior with a household vacuum unless it has proper filtration, and even then, be careful. Keep windows closed. Bag visibly contaminated floor mats only if you can do it without spreading dust. Wash hands. Remove shoes before entering the home. If your job requires fleet vehicles, stop pretending this is ordinary dirt. Check cabin filters, engine air filters, radiator surfaces, brake components, and electrical connectors only with protection and only under guidance. I could hear my own frustration, and I pulled it back because fear makes people quit listening. At 9:26, I got a call from an environmental engineer I knew from old air quality segments. She had worked on mine dust, wildfire ash, construction silica, and industrial contamination cases. She told me she had seen a sample from a Phoenix office rooftop. Not official, not chain of custody. Just a small tape lift and a wipe sample a maintenance guy had taken before his supervisor told him to stop. Under a basic scope, she said the grains were not uniform. Some were sharp mineral fragments, some were tiny spheres, some looked porous. Some had dark cores with red outer coatings. A few showed branching edges after exposure to humid air from a sealed container. She said, very carefully, that branching did not mean alive. It could be crystallization. It could be a reaction product. It could be contamination from the container. Then she told me to keep the dust dry and isolated if possible. That line made me change the advice. Keep it dry if possible. That sounds simple, but during a heat day with air conditioning and evaporative cooling and sweat and pools and irrigation and hospital humidification systems, dry is not easy. The dust darkened with moisture. Around wounds, it stuck and changed color. Around standing water, it formed films. Around cooler pads, it passed indoors. Around drains, it collected at metal grates. Moisture was one trigger. Electricity was another, metal was another, maybe charge, maybe chemistry, maybe some unknown material from the fragments reacting with oxygen. Water vapor, salts, and urban pollution. That was my working thought, not a conclusion. A meteorologist does not get to become a scientist in every field just because the day gets weird. The calls from normal people were the part that kept the whole thing grounded. A woman in Glendale said her kitchen smelled metallic every time the refrigerator compressor kicked on. A maintenance worker at a strip mall in Mesa said red powder collected around rooftop units and dripped down condensate lines and rusty-looking streaks. A teacher in Chandler said a student with a scraped elbow had red dust stick to the bandage after recess before the shelter order, and the school nurse wanted to know whether to remove it or leave it covered. A pool guy in Scottsdale said every pool on his morning route had a red film near metal ladders, lights, and skimmer baskets, not spread evenly across the surface. A delivery driver in Tolleson said his truck's warning lights flashed after he drove through a red patch near warehouse yard. I answered what I could and refused what I could not. That is important. In a crisis, people respect confidence, but fake confidence kills. For the scraped elbow, I said follow medical guidance. Avoid touching the dust with bare hands. Gently remove contaminated outer bandage if loose. Rinse around the area with clean water if advised by medical staff. Cover with clean material. And call a nurse line or urgent care, especially if redness, burning, swelling, numbness, breathing trouble, fever, or unusual discoloration appears. For the pool guy, I said stop service, do not brush pools, do not backwash into the street, document locations, and wait. For the refrigerator smell, I said turn off nearby ventilation if dust is visible, check for contamination around exterior intake or garage door gaps, and do not open machinery panels. By 10:15, the first rumor of infection hit. I hate that word when nobody has proof. Infection means a biological process. Contamination means exposure. Reaction means chemistry. Irritation means tissue response. Poisoning means dose and toxic effect. Radiation means a whole other set of rules. People mixed all of it together online, and the posts got stupid fast. Red dust zombies, alien spores, government nanotech, demon ash, fake meteor. Every dumb idea arrived before lunch. The truth was bad enough without decorations. We had unknown particulate matter associated with meteor debris, spreading across several states through weather and human movement, interfering with air systems and electronics, collecting around water and metal, and causing medical symptoms in exposed people, especially those with breathing issues or open skin. That sentence should scare any serious adult. At 10:40, a hospital in Phoenix moved part of its emergency department intake outside to a controlled decontamination line, then reversed the decision because dust was collecting around the temporary metal railings and portable fans. That kind of reversal tells you people are learning in real time. Nobody likes admitting a plan failed, but changing course is better than pushing a bad plan because it looks official. Hospitals began using covered entry paths, plastic sheeting, Taped seams, portable high-efficiency filtration units, and separate rooms for dust-exposed patients. Staff wore eye protection and better masks. Contaminated clothing went into sealed bags. Ambulances started wiping patient contact surfaces and checking ventilation intakes after transport from affected zones. That slowed emergency response, and slowed response creates other harm. My brother called again from near Tucson at 10:52. He had been on the pileup for hours. The scene was under partial control. Hazmat crews were there. Traffic was being diverted. He sounded rough, and I could hear coughing in the background. He said one trooper's handheld radio kept cutting out whenever dust collected near the battery contacts. Several patrol vehicles had sensor warnings. A tow truck stalled after idling in the haze too long. The air filters on some vehicles looked packed with red powder. He said the dust around the tanker trailer's metal frame had thickened into clumps, and responders were told not to step in them. One driver with road rash on his forearm was taken in fast because the red residue on the wound had darkened and hardened at the edges. I wanted to ask if he was okay. I did ask, because I am a person before I'm anything else. He said he was fine, which meant he was working. Then he told me something I did not put on air for another hour because I needed confirmation. He said a civilian drone had fallen out of the air over the crash scene, not lost signal and drifted down. It twitched, spun, and dropped onto the shoulder after flying through a thin red layer above the traffic. The operator was some guy filming from behind the closure. The drone's motors had red powder inside the vents. A hazmat tech bagged it. That mattered because small motors, batteries, circuit boards, and static charges give reactive particles plenty of places to cause trouble. At 11:10, Phoenix police began blocking access to several underpasses and low points where red dust had pooled. The underpass issue was easy to misunderstand. People think dust blows high and water runs low. This dust settled in low drainage zones, but it also climbed or collected around metal guardrails, electrical boxes, pump stations, and lighting systems. In a dry underpass, that created dense patches right where stalled vehicles and pedestrians might end up during a closure. At the Interstate 17 stack, cameras showed crews avoiding certain shoulders. Near the Salt River crossings, officials checked bridges and utility runs. Around Tempe Town Lake, reports of red film near railings and water edges triggered a closure of some paths. The standing water pattern got stronger by late morning. It was not every body of water. That made it harder. Some backyard pools were barely touched. Others had red dust concentrated around metal fixtures, lights, filters, or return jets. Canals with moving water showed deposits near gates and maintenance structures. Decorative fountains at office complexes collected red rings around pump housings. A golf course pond in the West Valley had a red skin near an aerator. A retention basin near a warehouse showed red powder lining the wet mud at the bottom, even though nearby dry ground looked cleaner. Water alone was not enough. Water plus metal, water plus electric pumps, water plus salts, water plus moving air, or water plus dust-carrying vehicles might have been the key. I kept saying might because might was the honest word. Around noon, the National Weather Service language shifted. It still used dust and visibility terms because that is the warning structure available. But the internal notes that reached meteorologists were different. Observed airborne particulate event inconsistent with available wind fields. Reports of non-meteorological particle accumulation. Coordination with emergency management ongoing. That was the closest the weather world came to saying, "We see what you see, and no, this does not behave right." Radar did not show a classic dust wall. Satellite imagery had faint discoloration and some thermal oddities near suspected impact paths. But the red dust in city environments was too low, too thin, and too surface-bound for normal broad tracking. We were working from cameras, sensors, calls, and human observation. This is where people need to understand how fragile information becomes when the hazard does not match the tools. Weather radar is built for precipitation, wind signatures, storms, and some debris patterns. Air quality networks are built around known particle sizes and sampling methods. Hospital labs are built around known tests. Police and highway systems are built around closures, crashes, and dispatch. Schools are built around fire drills, lockdowns, heat plans, and shelter-in-place procedures. Utility crews are built around electrical faults, line damage, equipment failure, and heat load. This dust touched all of those systems at once and did not fully belong to any of them. That is why the first day felt messy. Not because nobody cared, because the existing procedures did not cover enough of what was happening. At 12:17, federal agencies confirmed several desert debris zones were being secured. The public wording stayed bland. Potential meteorite recovery sites. Unknown environmental contamination. Avoid the area. Report suspected fragments. Do not handle material. I heard military aircraft had lifted out of bases in Arizona, California, and New Mexico. I could not confirm missions, so I did not say it as fact. What I could confirm was the closure of areas near Yuma Proving Ground, stretches east of Tucson, open desert near the New Mexico line, and parts of California desert routes where people had gone meteor hunting. Law enforcement started turning around curious drivers. That made some people think the government was hiding alien bodies. To me, hazardous material teams were responding to a spill that had already entered the supply chain. The first supply chain problem sounded small. A produce distributor in Nogales delayed outbound trucks because red dust was found on trailer seals and loading dock plates. Then a package hub in Phoenix paused operations in one section after conveyor sensors failed, and workers reported eye irritation near a dock where trucks from southern Arizona had arrived. Then a water delivery company started asking customers to leave empty bottles indoors instead of outside. Then a medical courier refused to pick up from a clinic with red dust visible near the entrance. That is how a strange environmental event becomes a city problem, not one giant failure. Many cautious stoppages, each one reasonable. Each one slowing food, medicine, repair parts, fuel, and staffing. The fuel reports were serious by early afternoon. Not because we were running out of gasoline. Because stations in affected zones had red dust around pump handles, card readers, vents, tanker fill points, and canopy lighting. Some pumps went offline, a few card readers failed. Drivers lined up anyway, because people hear emergency and fill tanks. Lines create idling. Idling pulls dust into engine compartments and cabin filters. People get out and touch contaminated surfaces. Someone spills fuel. Someone lights a cigarette near a gas pump because scared people still make reckless choices. I told people to stop topping off unless necessary. If you have enough fuel to stay home, stay home. If your station has visible red dust around the pumps, do not use it. If you must refuel for medical emergency or caregiving reasons, wear protection, touch as little as possible, and wash after. At 1:05, the first report from a lab source reached me through a university contact in Tempe. Again, not official, preliminary. The dust had high iron content, which could explain the color, but not completely. There were also nickel-bearing particles, silicates, and trace compounds the initial equipment did not identify cleanly. Some particles reacted when exposed to humid air. Some showed electrical conductivity higher than expected for common desert dust. A small sample near a powered device changed texture after several minutes. The contact warned me not to overstate it. I did not. I said experts were examining whether the red material included metallic and reactive particles, and that this might explain the electrical and filtration problems. I did not say alien. I did not say alive. I did not say nanotech. I said reactive particles. The word reactive upset people more than I expected. I think dust sounded natural and reactive sounded industrial. But desert dust is not harmless just because it comes from the ground. Fine mineral particles can scar lungs. Silica matters. Ash can carry toxins. Valley fever comes from fungal spores in disturbed soil. Pollen can put people in hospitals. Smoke can travel for hundreds of miles and hurt hearts and lungs. Reactive meteor dust is just another way nature can be hostile without caring about our categories. The difference here was speed and behavior. A normal hazard spreads with air, water, or contact. This one seemed to respond after arrival. It changed around moisture and current that forced people to protect not just lungs but buildings, equipment, vehicles, and water systems. By 1:30, calls from apartment buildings started filling the queue. Phoenix has plenty of older apartment complexes with aging air conditioning units, roof penetrations, wall units, shared laundry rooms, exterior doors that never seal quite right, and maintenance budgets already stretched. Tenants reported red dust around bathroom fans, under sliding doors inside laundry rooms, and near breaker panels. Managers wanted to know whether to shut systems down. Residents wanted to know whether to leave. There was no one-size answer. In one building, shutting air conditioning during heat could put elderly residents in danger within hours. In another, running contaminated rooftop units could spread dust through multiple apartments. I told people to call property management and city hotlines, document visible dust, avoid touching electrical equipment, close doors to contaminated rooms, and prioritize cooling for vulnerable residents with the cleanest available air. The shelters were a mess at first. Not because people did not try, because a cooling center is only useful if the air inside stays clean. The entry process does not drag contamination indoors. The ventilation system is protected, and transportation does not expose people more than staying home. Several libraries and community centers opened, paused intake, checked filters, then reopened with controlled entrances. Staff taped door gaps, put down damp mats, moved seating away from vents, and told people to bag dusty outer clothing. Some volunteers wore simple masks that were not good enough, but it was what they had. The city had to balance heat illness against dust exposure. People online wanted one clean answer. Real emergencies often give you two bad risks and make you choose the smaller one for each location. At 2:12, my brother's pileup scene changed status from traffic incident to contamination control zone. That meant longer closures and more frustration. Drivers trapped behind the closure were angry. Some tried to turn around across the median. Some walked forward to see what happened. One man demanded to be allowed through because his car had good filters. That is the kind of thinking that gets people hurt. A car cabin filter is not a hazmat suit. It is not designed to handle unknown reactive dust in heavy concentration, especially once the filter loads up or if seals leak. My brother said officers were telling people to stay in vehicles with ventilation on, recirculate unless there was a heat problem, a medical problem, or direct instruction to move. Water distribution became an issue because responders could not casually hand bottles through red-coated windows. I put that on air too. If you are stuck in a closure, conserve battery and fuel, but do not cook yourself. Crack windows only if the air outside is clear and you need ventilation. Keep a cloth over your nose and mouth when opening doors. Do not wipe dust across your face. Do not share water bottles after touching contaminated surfaces. Do not let kids crawl around the floorboards if dust has entered the vehicle. If someone has asthma, chest tightness, confusion, severe coughing, blue lips, heavy bleeding, or a wound contaminated with red material, emergency services and describe the exposure clearly. Do not just say dust. Say red dust after meteor event, breathing trouble, wound exposure, location. Dispatchers need the right words. The first confirmed death I heard about was not from the dust directly. It was a heat-related cardiac event during a road closure near Gila Bend. An older man sitting in a vehicle with the engine off because he was afraid to run the vents. That one hit me hard because it showed the danger of incomplete advice. I had told people to use recirculate, but I had also told people to conserve systems and avoid pulling dust in. The right answer depends on your car, the dust concentration, the heat, your health, your fuel level, and whether help is close. That is too much for a scared person in a hot vehicle, so I simplified. Heat can kill fast. If the inside of the vehicle is becoming dangerously hot, run the air conditioning on recirculate if it works. If it does not work, alert authorities. Use shade, cover skin, sip safe water, and tell dispatch you are at heat risk. Do not sit silently because you are afraid of making the wrong choice. At 2:47, an incident at a data center outside Phoenix pushed the electronics concern into bigger territory. The company did not name itself in public, but employees talked. Red dust had entered a service area through loading activity and collected near exterior electrical equipment and cooling intakes. Alarms followed. Backup systems switched states. No giant outage occurred, but enough automatic protection engaged that the facility reduced operations and restricted access. Data centers in the desert already fight heat, dust, power load, and water use. Add conductive airborne contamination and their cooling and electrical systems become a serious vulnerability. People do not think about data centers during a dust emergency, but banking, hospital records, logistics, dispatch maps, cloud services, and phone apps all depend on buildings full of equipment that hate dirty air and heat. Then the traffic lights started glitching in pockets. Again, not everywhere, not dramatic, just enough. An intersection in Mesa stayed red on one direction too long. A signal near a Phoenix industrial area went dark after a cabinet fault. Railroad crossing equipment near a dusty corridor required inspection. Portable message board showed partial text because dust got into components or power systems tripped. The Department of Transportation began treating some signal cabinets, roadside sensors, and camera systems as potentially contaminated. Police had to direct traffic at a few intersections, which put officers outside in the dust and heat. Everything fed into everything else. You could feel the city losing easy movement. I need to talk about masks because people argued about them all day. A cloth over your face is better than nothing for large dust, but it is not enough for fine particles. A properly fitted respirator rated for fine particulates is much better. An ordinary surgical mask helps with droplets and some splatter, but does not seal well against fine dust. Facial hair can break the seal. Kids need properly sized protection, and many do not have it. People with heart or lung problems may struggle in tight respirators. Eye protection matters because the dust irritates eyes and sticks to moisture. I told people to use the best protection available, not the imaginary perfect option. Seal gaps, avoid exposure, reduce time outside. Do not argue online from your driveway while breathing the stuff. By 3:15, Arizona, Nevada, California, and New Mexico were all reporting some form of red dust concern. Different severity, different confidence, same pattern. It appeared after the meteor shower, but not only under the debris path. It moved by vehicles and possibly by small air currents inside built environments. It accumulated around metal, electrical fields, and standing water. It caused respiratory and wound concerns. It interfered with filters, sensors, motors, and power equipment. Officials still avoided calling it an outbreak because outbreak usually implies disease, but that was the word callers used. I used event for most of the day. Then I slipped and called it the red dust outbreak around 3:20, and nobody corrected me. The meteor angle became harder to deny when a federal science liaison joined the state briefing and asked people to report fireball sightings, impact sounds, unusual residue, and suspected fragments without touching or moving anything. He said meteor material can vary widely and that investigation was ongoing. He did not say the dust came from space. He did not have to. The timing was too close. The distribution matched too many reported fragment paths at first, and the chemistry hints were not ordinary Sonoran desert dust. Still, there was a second layer. If the dust came from meteor fragments, why was it forming over city surfaces without new debris? Why did it intensify near equipment? Why did red clouds appear in places after trucks arrived? The material may have been changing after exposure to Earth's atmosphere. That idea sounded crazy until every other explanation got weaker. A materials scientist later gave me the cleanest explanation in human language. He said some meteor-derived material could enter the lower atmosphere in an unstable state, especially if it formed under conditions very different from Earth's surface. Once exposed to oxygen, water vapor, heat, salts, pollutants, electromagnetic fields, and mechanical grinding from tires and machinery, it could break down, grow crystal structures, release finer particles, or change conductivity. That does not require life. It requires chemistry and physics we do not fully understand yet. He also said the branching seen in moist samples might be crystal growth, not biology. Then he added that if it was biology, hospitals and environmental labs would not prove that in the first few hours. Nobody liked that ending. The first time I saw the dust move against the expected airflow with my own eyes, it was 3:38 in the afternoon. I had stepped into a back service hallway because the main studio air had started irritating my throat. The building engineer had shut one intake and was checking filters with gloves and eye protection. A thin line of red powder had collected along the base of a metal door that opened to the roof access stairs. The hallway air was moving away from that door because of pressure from inside the building. I could feel it on my hand. The red powder still gathered at the metal threshold and thickened near the hinge plates. It did not crawl in a dramatic way. It shifted in tiny steps when the air conditioning cycled and the door hardware vibrated. Still wrong, still enough. We sealed that hallway and moved to a smaller interior room with portable filtration. That is where I kept talking from. No fancy setup. No clean delivery. No pretty graphics. Just a microphone, a laptop, a backup battery, phone lines, and a producer writing updates on a pad because one of the screens flickered when dust got into a connector. I told listeners what had changed. Avoid roof access, avoid mechanical rooms, avoid electrical closets, avoid parking garages with visible red residue, keep building intakes closed if contaminated, and do not let maintenance staff become the first casualties because someone wants the office reopened. Building engineers, custodians, school maintenance crews, apartment handymen, and hospital facilities workers were suddenly people doing direct emergency work. Most did not sign up for hazmat work. At 4 o'clock, the medical picture got darker but still stayed realistic. No monsters, no instant transformations, no people dropping by the hundreds on camera. The danger was lungs, eyes, skin wounds, heat panic, and delayed care. Hospitals reported severe asthma attacks, chemical-like bronchial irritation, corneal scratches worsened by rubbing, contaminated cuts, and a few patients with abnormal inflammatory responses around open wounds. People with recent surgery were told to avoid exposure completely. Dialysis centers, nursing homes, and assisted living facilities started checking air intakes and transport plans. A burn clinic requested guidance on red dust exposure because bandages and healing skin made patients vulnerable. That is the kind of detail that tells you the emergency is real. It finds the weak points first. I received a call from a nurse at a Phoenix urgent care who sounded furious. She said patients were arriving with zip bags full of dust they had collected to show the doctor. Some had scooped it from cars with credit cards. One man brought in a suspected meteor fragment wrapped in a towel. Staff had to clear the waiting area and isolate the bag. I went on air and said, with more bite than usual, stop bringing samples into medical facilities. If you have dust on your body, say that. If you have symptoms, say that. Do not carry unknown material into a clinic full of sick people. Do not mail it. Do not sell it. Do not put it in a jar on your kitchen counter. Curiosity is not worth contaminating a nurse. The meteor hunter problem got ugly near Quartzsite. Groups had gone out before sunrise thinking they could find valuable fragments. Some used magnets on sticks, some had metal detectors. Some drove off-road through dusty washes and dry flats. By afternoon, several vehicles were stuck or contaminated, and at least 2 people needed rescue for heat exhaustion and breathing trouble. One video showed red dust coating a shovel and thickening around the metal blade. Another showed a person rinsing his hands from a cooler while red water ran into gravel. I refused to play the videos. I described the mistake and moved on. There is no need to reward dangerous behavior with attention. The desert punishes foolish choices even on ordinary days. At 4:35, state officials ordered broader closures of affected recreation areas, trailheads, canal paths, and public lands near suspected contamination zones. Phoenix closed access points around some washes and retention basins. Tucson warned residents to avoid low-lying dust pockets and stay away from crash closures. Las Vegas issued an advisory for vehicles arriving from Arizona and California desert routes. New Mexico asked ranchers to report red residue near water tanks and not move livestock through contaminated areas unless necessary. California transportation crews inspected rest stops, way stations, and desert highway facilities. The event had become regional in the practical sense. 4 states, hundreds of small decisions, and no clean edge. I kept coming back to wind because wind was the measurement I trusted most. At the surface, the pattern still did not support a broad natural dust transport event. Upper-level winds could spread fine material after atmospheric breakup, sure. Local drainage flows and urban turbulence could move particles near the ground. Vehicles could responsend it. Cooling systems could pull it indoors. But the repeated formation near electrical equipment and water made it clear we were not just tracking where dust went. We were tracking where dust changed after arrival. That was the phrase I used. Changed after arrival. It felt careful enough for public use and accurate enough not to insult anyone paying attention. The first time a public official said conductive particles, people screenshotted it within seconds. The phrase came during a technical update about utility precautions. Crews were instructed to treat red dust on electrical infrastructure as potentially conductive or reactive, avoid dry sweeping, avoid water application on energized equipment, use protective gear, isolate equipment when safe, and report abnormal heating or arcing. That was the most practical confirmation of what we had been seeing all day. Power companies do not use that language for ordinary dirt. They use it when dirt might create pathways electricity should not have. In a desert city under heat load, that is a serious sentence. Power demand rose through the afternoon because people stayed indoors. At the same time, solar production fell in contaminated areas. Some equipment tripped, and maintenance was slower because crews needed protection. The grid did not collapse, but local outages began. A block in Maryvale lost power after equipment faulted. A small outage in Mesa affected traffic signals in a grocery store. Parts of a business park near Tempe had air conditioning shutdowns after rooftop. Units clogged or tripped. Every outage turned into a heat problem and an air problem at once. If your power goes out in Phoenix during a red dust advisory, opening windows may expose you, but keeping them closed may overheat you. There it was again, two bad choices. I told people to build a cleaner room, not a perfect room. Pick an interior room with few exterior doors or windows. Close vents if they are blowing contaminated air, but do not shut down cooling blindly if heat risk is high. Use a portable air cleaner if you have one. Seal gaps with towels or tape. Keep dusty shoes and clothing outside the room. Wipe surfaces with damp disposable material, not dry sweeping. Use bottled water or covered safe water. Keep medications, phone chargers, pet supplies, and documents inside. Check on neighbors by phone first, not by walking through dust unless necessary. If you have to move someone vulnerable, coordinate before moving. A bad move can be worse than waiting in place. 5:10, the brother call came again. He was no longer at the original crash site. He had been reassigned to help with a closure closer to Tucson, where a second red haze had formed near a substation and a drainage channel. He said the air was clearer on one side of the road and redder near the fence line. He said responders had stopped using metal crowd control barriers because the dust gathered on them. They switched to vehicles and cones where possible, then had problems with dust on the vehicles. He laughed once, short and tired, and said even the cones were getting coated near the reflective bands. Then he coughed. He said he had changed masks twice and still felt grit in his throat. I asked him whether the pileup victims were stable. He said most were. Some had gone to hospitals. One tow operator was being monitored because of the wound exposure. A trooper with asthma was pulled off scene. Several civilians had eye injuries from rubbing dust into corneas. One driver had tried to wash his face with water from a roadside jug, then used the same wet towel on his kid. Both ended up needing care. That detail mattered, so I shared the lesson without naming anyone. Do not reuse contaminated towels. Do not wipe dust from one person and then another. Do not rinse red dust into open cuts. Use clean water, clean material, and keep contamination from spreading. By 5:30, the sky over Phoenix had taken on a reddish cast near the horizon, but not evenly. The sun was still harsh. Shadows were still sharp in places. This was not a giant wall of dust covering the valley. It was a city full of contaminated surfaces and local airborne pockets. That made it more dangerous in one way because people trust what they see. If the sky is brown and visibility is low, people understand. If the sky looks mostly clear but the air intake above a grocery store is pulling red, powder into the building, people do not understand. If your windshield looks clean but your engine filter is packed, you do not understand. If your child's school parking lot looks fine but the gym ventilation is contaminated, you do not understand. Visible disaster is easier than selective disaster. The grocery stores became pressure points. People rushed for bottled water, masks, filters, plastic sheeting, tape, pet food, medications, and fuel cans. Some stores closed entrances to keep dust out. Some stayed open and regretted it. Automatic doors kept sliding open and closed, pulling air through. Red dust collected in entry mats, cartwheels, metal shelving near loading areas, and around refrigerated case vents. Refrigeration equipment already works hard in Arizona heat. Clogged coils and dirty intakes raise temperatures, and food safety becomes another layer. Store workers should not have been expected to solve hazardous contamination while customers yelled about water limits, but that happened because emergencies always land on hourly workers first.
I told people not to hoard.
I also understood why they were doing it. Trust had cracked. The official explanation had shifted from dust and ash to meteor-related contamination to reactive particles under investigation. That kind of shift feels dishonest to the public, even when it is just new information arriving. I challenged the anger where I thought it was wrong. I said changing guidance is not proof of a cover-up. It can be proof that the situation is being measured. The real criticism was that early language stayed too familiar for too long. Calling it a dust storm taught people to treat it as ordinary. That was the mistake. Not every unknown needs panic, but it needs honest uncertainty from the first hour. At 6:02, an advisory came for people with open wounds, recent surgery, respiratory conditions, severe allergies, immune compromise, or eye injuries. Avoid exposure. Seek medical guidance after contact. Do not delay breathing symptoms. Watch for unusual redness, dark staining, swelling, hardening residue, fever, or worsening pain around contaminated skin. That last phrase, hardening residue, confirmed what several responders had already told me. The dust could form a crusty material when mixed with body fluids or wound moisture. Nobody knew whether that was a chemical reaction, mineral binding, or something worse. The advice was still simple. Keep it out of your body. That is the one sentence people should have heard all day. Evening should have helped because heat drops slowly after sunset, and dust storms often lose energy after the outflow fades. This one did not follow that comfort. Around 6:20, reports of red haze increased near electrical substations, rail yards, water treatment facilities, hospitals, and distribution centers. Some locations had been quiet all day until equipment load changed, humidity shifted, or contaminated vehicles arrived. A rail yard near Phoenix found red dust around metal wheels, couplers, and track hardware on cars that had crossed affected desert. A hospital maintenance team found red residue around rooftop intake screens after Helicopter operations stirred air. A water treatment facility increased monitoring after red particles appeared near exterior metal grates, though treated water remained under protection. That last point mattered. Municipal water systems are not open buckets, but exterior contamination still threatens equipment and worker safety. At 6:45, I finally said what I had been holding back. The red dust was not moving under normal weather rules anymore. It was moving through systems, roads, vehicles, vents, filters, loading docks. Hospitals, schools, canals, electrical infrastructure, clothing, tools, wounds. That is why maps of the event looked wrong. Weather maps show air movement. This required a contact map. Where did vehicles drive? Where did trucks unload? Where did air systems draw from outside? Where were metal structures energized? Where was water exposed? Where did people gather and then disperse? That is how the dust entered Phoenix in separate pieces and made its own pattern. My throat was raw by then. The producer wanted me off for a break. I stayed because the message was changing too fast. A meteorologist is supposed to explain the atmosphere, but by evening I was explaining buildings, roads, filters, and human behavior because the dust had made all of it part of the forecast. I told people in simple terms, tonight is not clear just because the sky gets dark. Do not open windows for cooler air unless officials confirm your area is safe and you do not see or smell contamination. Do not run whole house fans. Do not sleep beside a contaminated vent. Keep pets from licking paws if they walk through red dust. Wipe paws with damp disposable material and bag it. Do not let pets drink from outdoor bowls. The animal reports were practical, not dramatic. Dogs with irritated paws, horses refusing troughs, backyard chickens with red dust on waterers, cattle avoiding tanks. A veterinary advisory told owners to avoid outdoor water. Rinse animals only with clean water if necessary. Prevent licking of contaminated fur. And call a vet for breathing distress, eye irritation, or exposure to wounds. Ranchers had a harder problem because moving animals can spread contamination, but leaving animals without water is not an option. Some began setting up covered tanks and temporary water from cleaner sources. Others had no clean choice. Rural emergencies look different from city emergencies. In the city, you shelter in rooms. On a ranch, your animals, pumps, fences, tanks, trucks, and feed deliveries are all part of survival. At 7:12, a lab update leaked that samples exposed to humid air had produced smaller, secondary particles. That was not official enough for me to present as fact, but it fit too many field reports. If true, it meant wetting the dust could make some fraction clump, and another fraction become easier to breathe. That would explain why dry sweeping was bad. Pressure washing was bad, and careless rinsing could spread material into drains or aerosols. The official guidance began to reflect that without saying the leaked part. Do not disturb dust, do not spray with high pressure. Use controlled damp wiping only for small necessary areas while wearing protection, isolate waste, and wait for local hazardous material instructions. Cleaning became a technical operation, not a chore. People kept asking whether rain would fix it. In Phoenix, rain was not on the immediate forecast, but the question mattered for New Mexico in later days. The honest answer was nobody knew. Rain can clear airborne particles, but it can also move contamination into soil drains, washes, reservoirs, and buildings. If the dust reacts with water, rain could change it. If it conducts electricity, wet deposits on equipment could be worse. If it forms crusts, it might immobilize some of it. If it breaks into finer particles after drying, the next wind could relift it. A simple washdown was not guaranteed to help. That is a rough thing to tell desert people who are trained to pray for rain during bad air. At 7:40, the Tucson situation worsened again. My brother sent a short voice message because texting with gloves was hard. He said a red layer had formed near a wash and drifted toward a cluster of stopped cars that had been held outside a closure, no strong wind. The dust stayed low, then rose when engines started. Several drivers panicked and tried to leave at once. One car clipped a patrol unit. Another overheated. Officers moved people in groups to a cleaner zone, but the dust thickened near the metal fencing and drainage culvert. He said almost every object built to control traffic had become a place where the dust gathered. Then he said he knew wanted was the wrong word. He knew me too well. I used his report to explain why official staging areas kept changing. If responders set up near metal barricades, vehicles, lights, generators, fans, water, or electrical systems, the dust might accumulate there. That forced them to keep moving lines and equipment. It looked disorganized from a distance. Sometimes it was the correct response. I told listeners not to judge a moving checkpoint as failure without context. If a firefighter tells you to move back, move back. If a trooper redirects you away from a clean-looking road, there may be contamination ahead. If a school delays release after promising pickup, it may be protecting kids from a contaminated parking lot. People hate uncertainty, but rushing the wrong movement can spread exposure. At 8:05, we got the first report of a second red cloud forming over a city where no meteor debris fell. It was over the western side of Phoenix, near industrial warehouses, power equipment, and a series of retention basins that had received trucks all day from contaminated routes. I need to be careful here because the word cloud makes people picture a towering thing. This was a low suspended haze at first, visible in floodlights and security cameras, thickest around loading areas, metal roofs, parked trailers, and drainage channels. The wind at the nearest station did not support dust blowing in from the open desert. The suspected source was local. Red dust that had arrived on vehicles and surfaces was changing, breaking down, lifting, or reproducing through some non-biological process. Choose the cautious word you can live with. I used forming. That was the moment the first day became something else. Up to then, officials could still frame the event as meteor debris spread by weather and traffic. The new cloud formed where no fresh debris had fallen, after hours of contact with Earth air, heat, power systems, and water. That meant the hazard could generate new airborne episodes inside the built environment. It did not need a new meteor. It did not need a desert gust front. It needed contaminated material and the right conditions. The outbreak was not the meteor shower. The outbreak was what the meteor material did after it landed in a working city. I told people in West Phoenix and nearby areas to go indoors immediately, close windows and doors, switch air systems to recirculate if safe, avoid warehouse yards, loading docks, rail spurs, retention basins, canals, and substations, and report visibility drops without going outside to film. I told truck drivers to stop moving contaminated trailers unless directed. I told warehouse managers to shut dock doors, stop fans, isolate dusty zones, and protect workers. I told anyone with rooftop equipment not to send maintenance staff up in the dark. I told residents not to panic buy fuel because traffic would make the cloud worse. That was the strangest instruction of the day. Stop driving, because your vehicle might be part of the weather now. The phrase hit me after I said it, and I hated it because it sounded too sharp, but it was accurate. Vehicles were part of the weather now, so were ventilation systems, so were electrical substations, so were wet surfaces. The red dust had turned infrastructure into a movement system. This is why the official explanation failed. It treated the dust as a passive particle. Wind moves passive particles, water carries passive particles, people track passive particles indoors. But this material changed state, changed size, changed conductivity, changed adhesion, maybe changed chemistry based on the surface and environment. The forecast had to include contact, not just air. At 8:39, the state issued a stronger shelter advisory for affected urban zones and a regional request to limit non-essential travel across parts of Arizona. Nevada and California began screening certain incoming transport routes for visible contamination. New Mexico expanded livestock and water advisories. Federal teams requested reports from hospitals and utilities. Nobody used the word quarantine statewide. That would have been inaccurate and impossible. But specific sites were sealed. Impact zones, crash scenes, contaminated industrial yards, sections of highway, parts of a rail yard, and a handful of public facilities. The map now had red pins over places that mattered for supply. That scared me more than empty desert closures. You can close a wash. You cannot easily close the systems that feed a city. People wanted to know if Phoenix would be evacuated. No. Evacuation in a contamination event can make exposure worse if the routes are dirty, fuel stops are contaminated, cars are compromised, and destination cities are unprepared. 1 million people driving through red dust at night in 100-degree heat would create crashes, medical emergencies, fuel shortages, and contamination trails. The safer instruction for most people was shelter, reduce movement, seal what you can, keep cool, and wait for area-specific guidance. That does not feel heroic. It feels helpless. It is still often the correct move. The desert does not reward motion for its own sake. Around 9, a caller from Avondale described the second cloud from inside a warehouse office. He said dock lights showed red haze swirling low between trailers. I asked whether fans were running. He said big ceiling fans had been on all day because the dock was hot. I asked whether trucks from Tucson or California desert routes had unloaded. There, he said yes. I asked whether there were retention basins or standing water nearby. He said the yard had a low drainage area with water from a broken irrigation line. I asked whether there was metal dust, welding, battery charging, or electrical equipment. He said forklifts, chargers, metal racks, and a solar canopy. I told him to get workers into an interior office away from the dock, shut fans if it could be done safely, and call emergency management. He said the dust looked thicker when the fans changed speed. That call should be used in training one day if we survive the paperwork. It had everything: contaminated vehicles, metal trailers, heat fans, electrical charging, standing water, warehouse airflow. Workers staying on shift because nobody wants to be the one who shuts down freight. Ordinary pressure, ordinary decisions. The red dust did not need a villain. It needed our systems to keep doing what systems do. Move goods, cool buildings, power equipment, pump water, and keep schedules. That is the real horror of the first day. No single dramatic target. Just normal operations turning into spread routes before anyone had permission to stop. By 9:30, my voice was nearly gone. The room we were using had 3 portable filters running in taped seams around the door. We could still smell the metallic dryness whenever someone opened the outer hall. One producer had red irritation around her eyes from earlier exposure. The engineer's gloves were stained. We had bagged our shoes. The coffee was cold and nobody drank it because open cups felt stupid now. The laptop battery was on backup power because one circuit in the building had tripped. I kept reading verified updates from agencies, hospitals, road crews, utilities, schools, and callers I trusted. I rejected more information than I used. That is another thing people do not see. A crisis is mostly sorting garbage from signals while your own room gets worse. The brother call came at 9:48. He was being pulled from field duty for evaluation because of throat irritation and prolonged exposure. He was angry about it. That made me feel better because anger meant he had energy. He said the Tucson area closures were expanding and that some responders had learned to Watch for red dust thickening near metal before visibility dropped. He said one hazmat tech thought the dust carried charge or responded to charge. Differences. He said another thought humidity from washes and cooling equipment changed it. He said everyone had theories and nobody had time. Then he told me to keep telling people not to drive. That was the message from the road. Stay put unless staying put will hurt you. At 10:10, a federal emergency bulletin used the phrase extraterrestrial particulate contamination under investigation. That was the first official wording that openly tied the dust to material from beyond Earth. It did not say life. It did not say weapon. It did not say safe. It said avoid contact, avoid disturbance, protect respiratory system and eyes, isolate contaminated clothing and equipment, keep material away from water systems and electrical equipment, report suspected fragments, and follow local shelter guidance. I read it twice. The room went quiet both times. Not because it sounded dramatic, because it sounded bureaucratic and real. The red dust was now written into federal emergency language, and that made the situation harder to dismiss. I explained extraterrestrial in the least sensational way I could. It means from outside Earth. It does not mean intelligent. It does not mean alive. Most meteor material is rock and metal. Space dust hits Earth all the time in tiny amounts. The difference today is concentration, chemistry, reactivity, and exposure. If fragments from last night's meteor shower carried unstable material, and that material broke down into fine red particles after atmospheric entry, then we are dealing with an environmental contamination event with unusual properties. That is enough. You do not need to add anything. Keep it out of your lungs, keep it out of wounds, keep it out of water, keep it out of electronics, keep it out of buildings. Those are the rules until better ones arrive. The second red cloud in West Phoenix triggered a localized emergency response near several industrial blocks. Fire crews and hazardous material teams staged upwind, though upwind meant less than usual because the cloud was not obeying normal drift. Police closed roads. Warehouse workers sheltered. A few people tried to leave on foot and were brought back or redirected to a cleaner corridor. Traffic backed up on nearby arterials. Some drivers shut off engines. Some kept air conditioning running. One electric delivery van stopped with a battery system fault after driving through visible red haze. A diesel truck kept running but had filter warnings. Different technology, different weak points. That became a theme. At 10:45, the official advice for contaminated vehicles became more restrictive. Do not move vehicles from affected zones unless directed. Park away from homes, intakes, and water. Do not use household vacuums or pressure washers. Avoid opening engine compartments in enclosed spaces. Fleet operators should document vehicle movement and isolate suspect vehicles. That hit logistics hard. Food, medicine, fuel packages, repair crews, and emergency supplies all depend on vehicles. Every stopped truck means something does not arrive. Every moving contaminated truck risks spreading the dust. This is the kind of decision that looks simple from a couch and impossible from a dispatch office. Schools that had sheltered all day began controlled releases only in cleaner zones. Some kept students overnight because parking lots or bus routes were unsafe. Parents hated that, I understood. I also told them this was not a normal lockdown. A child walking through red dust to reach a car, then sitting in that car with contaminated clothing for an hour in traffic, may be less safe than staying in a filtered classroom with water and adults. Schools used gyms, interior hallways, cafeterias, and libraries. Nurses watched inhalers and medications. Custodians sealed doors. Bus mechanics checked filters. Teachers kept kids calm with games while parents screamed on phones. That is not a small thing. That is public survival work. Hospitals began transferring some exposed patients away from main entrances and limiting visitors. Nursing homes requested priority filter deliveries. Pharmacies struggled with lines and closures. Some clinics switched to phone triage. People with ordinary emergencies still needed help. Labor, strokes, injuries, infections, dehydration, diabetic problems, panic attacks, and heat stress. The red dust did not replace every other medical issue. It sat on top of them. That is why I told people not to flood emergency rooms for mild exposure without symptoms, but not to ignore serious breathing or wound problems. A system can fail from too many worried well patients, and it can fail from people staying home until treatable problems become critical. The middle path is hard when nobody trusts the air. At 11:15, the red cloud in West Phoenix began to thin near the first reported site, but cameras showed new wisps near another industrial yard several miles away. Again, not a giant moving wall, more local formation. More surface interaction. Emergency managers started using terms including contaminated corridor and secondary aerosolization. I translated that. Dirty routes and dust getting back into the air. That is all most people needed. If red dust is on surfaces and something disturbs it or changes it, it can become airborne again. A truck moving through a yard can do it. A fan can do it. A dry brush can do it. A vibration near metal equipment may help. Humidity may change it. We still did not know which factor mattered most. I had to correct a bad assumption I heard from callers. If the dust came from meteors, it must be limited to places under the meteor path. No. The first deposits may follow fragments and atmospheric fallout. After that, people move it, machines move it, air systems move it. Water systems can concentrate it. Electrical equipment can attract it. Cities are built to circulate materials all day. Every loading dock highway, airport baggage system, rail yard, mail facility, school bus depot, hospital ambulance bay, and grocery distribution center can become a node. That does not mean every node is contaminated. It means you have to investigate the network, not just the sky. Near midnight, I gave the clearest summary I could. This began after a meteor shower over the southwest. Red particulate matter appeared across Arizona and nearby states. The earliest official explanation called it dust, ash, or disturbed sediment, but wind data, particle behavior, and affected locations do not support a normal dust storm. The material collects around metal structures, electrical equipment, air filters, solar panels, vehicles, standing water, wounds, and some ventilation systems. It can irritate eyes and lungs and may be more dangerous for people with respiratory conditions, open wounds, recent surgery, or fragile health. It may contain meteor-derived metallic and reactive particles that change after exposure to Earth's air, moisture, heat, and electrical fields. Secondary red haze is formed over at least one urban area where no meteor debris fell. That means contamination can create new airborne hazards after it arrives. Then I told people what to do for the night, because fear without action is useless. Stay indoors if your area is under advisory. Keep windows and doors closed. Use the cleanest room you have. Keep cooling on if heat is a risk, but avoid pulling contaminated outdoor air through dirty intakes. Use recirculation where possible. Avoid evaporative cooling if pads or intakes are contaminated. Do not disturb red dust. Do not dry sweep. Do not pressure wash. Do not touch it with bare hands. Keep it away from open water, food, pets, and wounds. Do not drive unless necessary. If you must drive, avoid visible red haze. Keep ventilation on, recirculate, and do not stop in travel lanes. If exposed, remove contaminated outer clothing carefully. Bag it, rinse skin gently, protect eyes, and seek medical help for serious symptoms. I also told people what not to do, because that list was just as important. Do not collect meteor fragments. Do not bring dust samples to hospitals, schools, police stations, or newsrooms. Do not sell red dust online. Do not clean solar panels yourself tonight. Do not open electrical panels. Do not send workers onto roofs without protection. Do not force school pickups through contaminated lots. Do not move livestock through red deposits unless there is no safer water option. Do not assume a clear street means a clean building. Do not assume a normal-looking building has safe air. Do not trust random cures, homemade sprays, miracle filters, or people claiming the government wants your land because of space minerals. Bad information was already spreading faster than official guidance. At 12:22 in the morning, the building lights flickered once, and everyone in the room stopped talking. The filters kept running. The backup battery clicked. The hallway beyond the tape door stayed quiet. My producer looked at me and pointed to the next update. I read it. West Phoenix shelter advisory expanded. Tucson closures remain. Interstate 10 restrictions continue. Hospitals request reduced non-emergency visits. Utility crews reporting contaminated equipment. Federal teams en route. Suspected meteor debris sites sealed. Secondary red haze under investigation. No statewide evacuation order. Stay indoors. Limit travel. Avoid contact. It was the same information in harder language. The last thing I saw before I ended that first day feed was a security camera still from a warehouse roof in West Phoenix. It showed a red coating around a line of metal vents and a darker patch near a shallow puddle from a leaking pipe. Above it, a faint haze sat in the floodlight. No wind flag in the frame moved enough to explain it. No meteor had fallen there. No desert storm was crossing the city. The dust had arrived on our roads and in our systems, and now it was making more of itself or making more of the conditions that carried it. I do not know which sentence is scientifically correct yet. I know both are bad. So I am ending this first day with the only honest thing I can say. This is not a normal dust storm. It is not ordinary ash. It is not a reason to run blindly into the desert or pack the freeway. It is a contamination event tied to meteor material, and it behaves differently around metal, water, electricity, filters, vehicles, and injured tissue. The danger tonight is not one huge red cloud over every house. The danger is 1,000 small contacts that turn into the next cloud before morning. Keep your people inside. Keep your air as clean as you can. Keep dust out of your lungs and wounds. Keep vehicles parked unless movement is truly necessary. Check on the vulnerable without dragging contamination to their door. And if you see red haze forming under lights where the wind should not put it, do not argue with it. Get inside and report it. I stayed in the room after the feed ended because leaving meant crossing the service hall. The engineer checked the outer door with a flashlight through the narrow window. Red dust had thickened along the metal frame. It had not covered the floor evenly. It had gathered where the screws held the threshold down and where the latch plate met the jamb. That small detail bothered me more than the big maps. Maps can be wrong. Models can be incomplete. Cameras can exaggerate color. But a door frame inside a sealed building is a simple thing. Air pressure should have pushed away from it. Cleaning crews had not touched it. Nobody had opened that door in hours. Still, the red line was wider than before. I thought about every building in Phoenix with a door of that kind. Every school mechanical room. Every hospital loading dock. Every apartment laundry closet. Every grocery freezer door. Every bus depot service bay. Every warehouse with a battery charging station. Every old house with a swamp cooler on the roof and a gap under the back door. The meteor shower had looked distant when people filmed it from patios and desert turnouts. By the end of the day, it was in filters, vents, water bowls, brake dust, bandages, electrical cabinets, and the seams of the room where I had been telling people to stay calm. That is how the first day ended. Not with an answer. With maintenance problems, medical calls, road closures, and a red line under a door that should have stayed clean. If this recording keeps moving after tonight, remember the order of what happened. First came the meteor shower, then red residue on cars, roofs, panels, and water, then wrong wind data, then air filters failing. Then roads closing from low red visibility near Tucson and desert corridors. Then hospitals treating lungs, eyes, and wounds. Then electronics and solar equipment faults. Then dust collecting around metal, electrical fields, and standing water. Then contaminated vehicles carried it into warehouses and city systems. Then a second red cloud formed over Phoenix where nothing had fallen from the sky. That order matters. It means we are not waiting for the next meteor to know where the next hazard appears. We have to watch what the dust touches. I do not know what the red dust becomes by morning. I know what it is tonight. It is inside the state's movement, and movement is what we have to slow without shutting down the people who need help. That is the balance now. Shelter but do not overheat. Stop driving but move patients. Seal buildings but keep air cool enough to survive. Protect water but keep animals alive. Isolate vehicles but deliver medicine. Shut fans but keep workers from passing out. Every instruction has a cost. That is why I am telling you the reasons, not just the rules. People follow rules better when the rules make sense. For now, treat every red deposit as unknown and hazardous. Treat every clear patch beside it as suspect until checked. Treat every official update as incomplete, not useless. Treat every rumor as false until it proves itself. The dust does not need your belief. It needs contact, moisture, current, heat, or motion, and we have given it a whole modern desert city full of all five. That is the part I cannot stop thinking about. We built Phoenix to survive heat by moving air, moving water, moving power, and moving people across long distances. Tonight, those same systems are the reason the map keeps changing. I am going to keep the filters running. I am going to keep the door sealed. I am going to wash my hands again, even though they already feel raw. I am going to call my brother when his evaluation is done. I am going to keep the laptop off the metal table, because dust keeps gathering near legs, and if the red line under that service door gets wider before morning, I am not going to call it a dust storm. Not once. Not for anybody.